They wish they could see the behind the scenes. I'm gonna let them know though. That was so good. Welcome everyone to another episode of Old Souls and Seekers. Oh, we have no fun here whatsoever. Personal development's supposed to be serious, everyone. Be serious. Be serious. Be serious.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman. I actually just started watching the new one.
It's dark.
Did you see it?
I did watch it, yeah. It's I love the artistry of the movie. It wasn't a great movie, all told. I thought the acting was sensational across the board. I love the direction that they went with it because it's so absolutely different. And after Chris Nolan, knocked out the park, it's like, okay, what do you put up against it? And I love that they went the world's best detective route with it, and that he's young and still brash and like taking gunshots. He's not using a scalpel yet. Like it's
Yeah.
like Sledgehammer in this one.
Yeah.
For a movie that's been done so many times, it's really hard to articulate it in a new way, and they did an awesome job from that perspective. Super artsy, but it like all told, it wasn't a movie that like drew me in and made me want to watch it. Yeah.
So I I started watching it. I actually started watching it with Shia. I
Well,
promise, guys, we'll get to the topic of today's thing. But I started watching with Shia, and it was kind of like, it's a little bit dark,
it's
but he
dark.
was into it. He wasn't too scared, and we stopped it halfway because it's a long movie, and we just didn't have time to finish it. But I've been thinking about it nonstop because I want to know how the thing ends.
Yeah.
Um, he's so good in it, like
Yeah.
Pattison. I don't
Yeah.
know how to
Yeah.
pronounce his name.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
been doing some pretty awesome movies recently.
Yeah, it was it's cool. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's always kind of cool to see someone else's vision of
Yeah.
what it could be. But again, after Chris Nolan, it almost felt like no one should ever touch that movie again. But
Nah,
here we are.
that's how it always is, until. But I hope they expand that universe. I hope it works really well. Like Colin Farrell, like that character that he played is just incredible. Like, I'm interested to see what they do with the new Joker and
Yeah. I
all that
couldn't
kind of.
believe that was him. I looked it up. I was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah,
Like,
you can't even
how?
tell.
I
Yeah,
could It didn't sound like him. It didn't look like there was no piece of him in there. I was like,
yeah,
"Wow, amazing."
they crushed it. They did
Um,
they did crush it from that point of view.
yeah. In any event, for those that are watching live, Guy put a headline. And we were talking behind the scenes of what we wanted to discuss today. And I said to Guy, "Oh, let's talk about the 4 levels of awareness." And Guy on the headline wrote 5 levels of awareness. And so I was like, "Oh, by the way, it's 4." And I can't really see, my camera kind of covers the top of my screen, so I could never see the title.
Uh-huh.
And then afterwards, I kind of like, I did one of these. I was like, "Oh, I wonder what he wrote." And I did one of these. And I was like, 5 levels. I was like, "It's 4 levels." So I go to Guy. I'm like, "Guy, there's only 4 levels." He goes, "It's too late." And then before the thing kicks off, he goes, "Why don't you come up with a 5th one on the fly?"
If you can't come up with your own spiritual level on the fly, bro, after 20 years of
It's
doing work, we'll be
amazing.
very disappointed in you.
Maybe it's
But
just when you turn into like a rainbow, and that
rainbow
we'll just
body,
call
there
that
you
the
go.
fifth
Fifth level is full
fifth
rainbow
level.
body. There we go.
We just
We have
came up
no
with it.
idea how to get
Anyway,
there.
we this is something that we've kind of just been mapping for ourselves. I don't think that you're gonna like go and find this necessarily in a book. I think it's just a homologation of a lot of the work that we've done
Cool.
as
Homologation.
well. Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah.
Homologation.
Yeah.
Of stuff that we've done, pieces that we've collected from different teachers, mentors, experiences from our lives, as well as having taken tens of thousands of people through different various modalities and works, etc. So what we wanted to do is just take a little bit of time today and kind of walk you through. We've actually created this ascension model within Satori Prime. So we've mapped out our programs to match on how to take people through the different levels of awareness so that wherever you are on your journey, you can kind of go through those trainings, go through those practices, and find your way to that next level.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Anything you wanted to drop in there?
No, I think it brings comfort for people to have a something to shoot for, a direction to head in. And
Mhm.
the one thing I will add, I guess, in here is that even though there is an ascension, and we think of ascension as linear, and to some degree, for most people, it's going to feel like a linear process. Awakening awareness is really, it's actually a non-linear process. Somebody could like go from 0 to level 4 just
Mhm.
because you have an experience, hang out at level 4, and then like discover level 2 and start becoming more well-rounded. So even though we're using that architecture because that's just kind of how our brains think in linear fashion, time linearity, awakening can be very spontaneous, quite sporadic, and we've seen different clients and students of ours in the past who again, or just can suddenly have premonitions or begin channeling. Like, I don't even know how to begin training someone to say, hey, you're going to learn how to channel. It's just like there's a certain fluidity in different systems, certain gifts that everybody has developed throughout their lives that they may not even think as spiritual or awakened in nature. But as you awaken yourself and liberate energy in your body, there are just like natural things that arise and come forward, and people express their gifts in different ways because their system is organized differently. So it's like like everything else, it's like a awareness or intention or energy or even consciousness, right? Shows up in these like giant fractals. It can be like thousands of different ways, just like there's so many different
Totally.
types of humans, so many different types of animals, so many different types of planets, right? These are just different articulations of all the same energy. And so, of course, if you're going to liberate energy and free yourself from the conditioning of that we're kind of all stuck in this human experience right now, as that happens, these expressions of energy and awareness are going to come out of people in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, Eckhart Tolle, for those that know him, um, his story is he fell asleep on a park bench and enlightenment hit him, right? So he was right away at level 4 without having done any of the level one, two, three work. So yes, it is plausible. People can sometimes get to level 4 and they don't even find out about level 1 or 2, 3. Um, and that is to say that I feel that every step and every level is imperative to create a holistic picture. A lot of times, people that have really fast awakening experiences, it's actually very, very scary because they don't have the foundation and the pieces built in to understand what the hell is happening. And it can be very, very scary.
Yeah, we,
So,
yeah,
I-
sorry, just to say that too. Like, yeah, people we've seen that have had very fast awakening processes have often described it as one of the most painful experiences of their lives. And so, with clients and students, you often see them wanting to accelerate into consciousness, and it's like, that also means that you're gonna, if you intend that, maybe that would happen, maybe. I don't think that's how awakening works. It just kind of has its own timing for people. Your healing has its own timing. Your body has its own timing. But if that were to happen, like the amount of uncomfortable energy and experiences and memories that you probably have to go through in a very short window of time would probably take all the fun out of the awakening process. And so that seems to be a pattern for people with very fast awakening processes. They feel quite
yeah.
chaotic.
So I'm going to just kind of walk you through the map of the levels, and then we can kind of just intermingle and play a little bit with each one and give you an idea that maybe you can kind of start to map onto yourself where you're at. Uh, don't get attached to this map by any stretch of the imagination. I know there's a book that I'm reading right now, and he, instead of calling it levels, he calls it locations. And um, it's interesting because I find myself reading about things where I have access to certain aspects of what he talks about in
Hmm.
locations, and then totally not other aspects in certain locations. And then I'm sitting there and I'm listening to my brain go, well, am I location 2 or 3, or is it 4, or am I 3.5, or is it 2? So I don't want you to get stuck there because honestly, it's irrelevant. It's just a felt sense, and we're going to walk you through the opening, right? The levels are this, if you can imagine kind of a lens on a camera, it's almost like the opening of the aperture is what we're talking about. So it's the opening of awareness and what that means. And as you open awareness, what can we have access to and what can we play with that opened awareness, right? Open aperture. So that's kind of what I want to say there before we go down this. So, level one of awareness is a realization that awareness has been trapped in a localized place called the mind, right? So when most people think of like where they are witnessing the world from, it is somewhere, they'll say here, here, somewhere here. Um, but I want you to imagine if you can like just visualize awareness as this little ball, if you will, that is just kind of sitting in the center part of your head. And it is, while it's sitting there, this is where your mind is. This is where access to your eyes are, your ears, your mouth, your sense of smell, taste, right? So all of our senses are pretty much tied into this area. In fact, when you touch something, when you see something, everything is going back into the brain, and that is what is deciphering. So if you think of awareness as locked in this place, you begin to realize why we view the world in this singular fashion that almost everyone views it from. Because we're all trapped basically in the same singular place. So level one is this.
Not by choice, mind you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Not by choice.
it's like we were conditioned into a prison, like walked into a prison before we even recognized that we were being walked into the prison.
Exactly. And if you want to see the opposite side of it, if you watch any 2 or 3-year-old interacting with the world, you will realize that they interact with the world very differently than the way that adults interact with the world. They are not awareness, their awareness has not yet solidified into this trapped place. They are living in this ecstatic connection to source. They're very impulsive, which to adults is very annoying and scary, right? They are very free flowy. They can be 1 second, tantrum on the floor, another second bouncing off the wall with excitement, then over there crying. So it's just, and to the adult mind, we're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But they're so fluid with it because it's not trapped. So with awareness being trapped in here comes this other aspect of that mind, that talking mind that is constantly perceiving, judging. So it's taking in the world through your eyes, through your ears, through your nose, through your mouth, through your felt sense, and everything is being filtered through this experience. And everything is being opined on and about this person and your situation and that person, this circumstance and your money and your body and your kids and your wife and your husband. Everything is just, you're constantly being told a story. By the way, when the story that you keep telling yourself is blown up in your face, or people try to divert you from that story, or a little hole gets poked in there, how quickly does the mind come in to plug that hole? And no, 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 it's because of this, right? Like all of a sudden this whole new script gets written, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, 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 it's that's what it is. You just watch it play out right now with politics and everything.
I thought a really interesting thing in that book, the book we're reading right now is called The Finders, right? The Finders.
The Finders, yeah.
Yeah, something that was really interesting. And again, these are just kind of like maps that science is starting to discover about, like, people who have had awakening experiences. So, one of the key aspects here is that people who are more awakened are less, they don't buy the stories that the mind is generating. And then
Yeah.
they stop buying other people's stories that their minds are generating, because it creates, like, there's just a subjective view. You're like, yeah, there's a story, but like, we don't have to create a whole reality out of that story. But one of the interesting things I found, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I've had that, many of the things are explaining I've had those experiences, or I'm having those experiences. And one of them is people getting confused because it seems like their memory
Me
has
too.
decreased. How interesting was that, right?
Me
And I was like,
too.
oh,
I actually, I'm
yeah,
in bed and I went,
huh,
aha.
yeah.
It's
And
like,
so just to explain to the listeners, so the book says that people who are more awakened oftentimes feel like their memory is degrading, which I would agree. And then of course it's confusing because you're like, well, I've gotten older, or I've drank, I've probably done, taken some substances that probably killed a few brain cells. Like maybe that's why. And again, memory is not one of these things we actually understand really well because your memories are non-local. That's what they're finding, which if you're spiritual seems pretty obvious. Like it exists in the field more than in any single location in the brain. And again, like through neurology, we're seeing like how many different parts of the body and mind light up one time to create what seems like one single memory. But what's interesting in this book is saying that because we tell ourselves less stories, then the mind recalls less stories. It doesn't keep generating the images and the trauma of the past as much because you're literally saying to the brain, that's not important to me right now. And so it seems to the user, right, to the person in that experience, that their memory has gotten worse because they can't actually remember. But it's just a lack of importance on like inner storytelling. There's a lot more fluidity, kind of like with children, right? Like they're changing their story all the time. My son, I know Elon's daughter, is very, very creative, and it's like they're constantly telling them stories and generating worlds for themselves to live inside of, and it's this like ever evolving like nonstop process. But as adults, it's like one story, the world is this way, I'm this way, they are that way, right? And there's none of that. But as you detach from that, as that becomes less important to you, as the qualities of being right about how things are
Yeah.
deteriorate, and what really begins to matter to you is more your presence and the quality of your experience than the story that's attached to that. I can 100% see why that, like, the brain is always going to follow suit with whatever is the most efficient. So,
It's funny that you also resonated with that part because I read it
okay.
and it was this light bulb moment that went, holy crap. Because
Yeah.
what's interesting is I find that I'm way more present in the moment. Like my connection to people when I'm with them
Yeah.
feels way more connected. But if you asked me 6 months from now about that moment and you were like, remember we talked about this, this, and this? I was like,
Mm-mm.
no fucking way in hell do I remember. Maybe if you recalled and you brought it back to my attention, maybe. But it was really interesting because it's like you don't put the importance on that story. It is
Yeah.
more of this felt sense in the moment connection that gives you the experience more than the, oh, let me hold on to this, right?
Right.
Yeah. So level 1 is a simple shift that you notice first and foremost that awareness has been trapped. And once you notice that awareness has been trapped, you now have access to something. And that access to something is the realization that awareness doesn't have to be trapped there. In fact, awareness can be anywhere. And when you begin to learn to shift awareness from this trapped place outside, that is level 1 of what we have called our awareness effect, right? So simply put, is just this knowing that this is trapped and then that there is this other way. That is level 1. And it gives you this access to move it out. Now, we create. So, why does awareness keep going back into the mind? That's what we kind of train people on is like your awareness is going to always want to go back and default into this place. Knowing why it does that and what are your specific patterns or strategies that have it jump back in there is really, really good to know. This is,
Mhm.
when we talk about looking under the hood of the car and understanding what is driving this thing, most of us get in the car, you turn the key, you go. But those of us that actually can open and look under the hood and go, oh, this does that and this does that, right? Gives you a lot more access to understanding. And could be said about anything, whether you're cooking or writing, the nuances that make it a lot more interesting. So, our level 1 training is really to help someone understand why it keeps going back in there. What are those protection mechanisms? And then how to, at the very least, be able to shift awareness out of there. And that is level one. Anything you want to drop in there in addition to that?
Uh, no, let's kind of get into so how, what's the function of that? Like, why would somebody want to
Yeah.
learn how to habituate that? And guys, just to kind of give a background on this, like, anything you're going to do with awareness is going to require practice. You have a certain habituation that has led to, I mean, like lifetime basically of habituation that has led to you retreating into your mind, into yourself to attempt to create safety, to deal with uncomfortable sensations and feelings in your body, with circumstances, what have you. It's like, 9 out of 10, if not 9.9 out of 10 times when you're dealing with something, you're going to go up to your mind and go, what's happening here? And it's doing that even before you've even gone up there to ask it those questions. It's already doing stuff that it knows to do when circumstances like that arise and make you feel that way. It just has these automated programs that it runs. And so what we're going to start touching here is like, okay, well, why do you want to learn to non-localize your awareness? And what does that give you access to? What does that open up?
Yeah. So right now, if that's where you're at, or even if you've kind of gone through that level, you already start to realize how debilitating living from our mind is. Right? When someone explained to you, there's this voice in your head, and actually there's thousands of voices in your head, but just for the sake of the discussion, there's a voice in your head that's not you. And knowing that gave you a huge shift. So now when we can shift awareness and pop it out from there, level two is the ability to shift this awareness and actually bring it into our body, into the nervous system, and have awareness instead of viewing through the eyes, the ears, the thoughts. We can have that same awareness, witness from the body, start to witness a felt sense, an emotional sense, an energetic sense that lives and has always lived. It's always been there in your body. And when you begin to move awareness into your body, this is where we shift from the world kind of personal development, of reframing, of managing yourself and your circumstances and your anger or your anxiety and managing your frustration and your ups, right? Instead of managing, we can now start to touch the root causes of why certain patterns arise in your life. So the healing work happens with awareness starting to stay. Michael Singer calls it the seat of awareness, finding its way to the seat of awareness and actually being able to sit in the seat of awareness for extended and prolonged and prolonged and prolonged periods of time. So just a quick shift to give you a little bit of a map. What happens in the beginning, that first level, right? We become aware that awareness is trapped. Now we want to shift awareness out. Now, here's the thing. Learning to become aware that awareness is trapped takes time. Shifting awareness out of that place also takes time. And then what happens is it's going to toggle. It's not going to stay out where you tell it. It's always going to like go back to where it defaults because that's just what it knows. So something that we notice is that when people start this practice, it takes you a long time to catch awareness being stuck in here, right? Like to catch it can take you hours or days or whatever it is. And then you go, oh, it's just trapped in there. Now to shift it out might also take you a long time. And then to shift that into your body can also take some effort. And then the amount of time in the beginning that it actually stays in the seat of awareness and stays in your body is very, very short. We call it glimpse practices. And it's going to keep toggling out, back into your head, into the body, this and that. So in level two, there's two intentions. One is level two, the intention is that as we shift awareness and allow it to sit in the body, that's where the body begins to heal. I mean, like, and Guy will talk about it in a second, but like real healing. Okay. So that's the intention. The practice is shortening the time that it takes you to become aware that awareness is trapped, shortening the time that it takes for awareness to snap out of that trapped place, and then lengthening the time that awareness can spend in the body, because healing will only happen with awareness in the body. And so really the focus at level 2 is how can we extend that time frame so we can sit in there longer and longer and longer. Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Yeah, I was actually, as you said that, I was like, oh, I'm curious how they define healing. And for a moment here, before I read it, I think it would be an interesting exercise for whoever's listening right now, whether on the podcast or live. Like, what's your definition of healing? Like, how would you know that a healing has occurred for you? You know, what would have to take place? What would be in your experience? And so maybe it's not super well manufactured. Maybe some of you guys want to even write it in the chat box as you're listening to this. Like, what do you feel defines healing? Because what I might define it, or how Elon might define it, might not be your personal experience with it,
Sure.
or what you're looking for, or what you might think that it is. And so it's, I think, an interesting exercise to kind of answer that for yourself. Oxford says it's the process of making or becoming sound or healthy again. I hate when they use the word
The
that they're
word.
trying to define in the definition. Let's see what Merriam says, because Merriam's always got the right answer. To make free from injury or disease, to make sound or whole. That one I like, that last part, to make sound or whole, to make well again, to restore to health, which is also a really, I think, important word here, is that you're not doing something new. You're just restoring it back to its original shape or
And
color. Or,
neutral
yeah, just like back,
homeostasis.
yeah, some homeostatic thing. And so, like for me, like how do I know when healing has occurred? Well, I think at first it's an intuitive thing. Something just feels different. Maybe you can't even define what feels different, but something feels different, right? Like if I had an injury in my hand, which I have recently had, and then the injury goes away, like I broke my hand and fractured it or something. I'm not really sure. I didn't get it X-rayed, but just from the length of time it took to heal, it would indicate probably some kind of fracture, like in my hand, in my wrist, or whatever. And then it's not. Then it's just kind of gone, and I have the usage of my hand back, like that to me, right? Like something that was taking a lot of my energy away, and I had to put a lot of awareness on my hand to not keep injuring it again, which inevitably kept happening anyway. But now that it's gone, it's like my awareness is not with my hand very often anymore, right? Like that pain pulled my awareness there. And so in our lives, it's like, where can we see that same kind of conditioning occurring, which is like in our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to others, our relationship to, big organizations and groups and stuff like that. And so to me, how I know a healing for sure has happened beyond just my intuition that something feels different is I'm in a situation, in a circumstance that historically for decades I've known to cause me a lot of anxiety, overwhelm, or reactivity. And then I'm in that situation, and maybe for the first time in my life, that reactivity is not happening. There is just a space of neutrality, and that neutrality lends itself to me being able to respond in a new way. So we've moved from reactivity, which happens on its by itself, to a response, which happens consciously, and that response happens literally in a new reality. It's as if it's like reality itself burst, like a bubble that's burst. Now there's just space. That response creates something new, right? Because maybe it's like in the interaction you say something that you would normally not say, or you take an action, and that response now lends itself to a new reality arising, right? And then again, you can decimate that and start that process as many times as you wish over and over again. None of us are stuck in our personality. Let me say it again. Like, it's so funny. Every time I dig into deep science on anything, whether it's health in the gut or this or that, the overlying theory at the start is you got what you got, you don't what you don't, and if you use it up, you don't have more. And then decade after decade now, as we do research on everything like brain plasticity, right? 20 years ago, we thought you had brain cells. If they died, that was it. And then they thought it's like fatty tissue and this and that. It's like, it doesn't matter where you go. Always the overarching theory is that's how you got. If you destroy it, you're done.
Yep.
And now every time they do deep research, they're like, by the way, we've now discovered and shown that it can regrow itself. It can bring itself back to homeostasis and neutral. It's like, yes, yes, look around at all plant life and animals and living things. That's what they do. And I'm sure if we look down anything long enough, we will discover the same thing over and over again. And so like your personality is not a static thing. It's not a solid thing, but when we think of it as solid or static, you're stuck in that. Personality, a personal reality is really what it is. But you can shift your reality. Of course, you could do that through the mind. That's one portal, but that makes it difficult and very habituated, and it feels like a lot of management. Or you can go, that's the symptom, is the mind. The source is what's happening inside your energetic field and what the body is experiencing as contractions and subtle energy. And if you start understanding how to work with that subtle energy, you can also learn how to metabolize that energy and bring it back to homeostasis or neutrality, which allows for, again, right, a new response and then a new personal reality or personality to arise. And then you start noticing new features in your personality that maybe you have long since forgotten, or now you're just generating from that space. And so it almost is like once you've cleared that canvas, you now have a blank canvas. That once the reality of your personality has disappeared, you have a blank canvas from which you can paint your new personality onto. Now, is this going to be an overnight shift? Sometimes that happens for people, those quantum leaps. But generally speaking, it is, a bit of a process of discovery. Hmm.
Yeah. And I would just offer that for me, my experience of this release or back to neutrality is if you've ever gone to a chiropractor or a massage therapist or an acupuncturist or some sort of practitioner that works with your physical body, and they release something that you have been living with for years, and then they release that thing, and you feel this, it's almost like your body is starting to realign itself in a weird way, and you feel such a release. It's almost this instant of peace and relaxation that just courses through your body. It's like this wave of a ripple. And then you look to the practitioner and you go, "Oh my God, I've never felt this like release before. I've always had this thing in my neck or always had this thing in my back." And they go, "Well, welcome to how everyone else lives. And you don't realize that other people have not been experiencing life the same way that you were experiencing life. You just thought this is how everyone kind of holds this pain. And then when it gets released, it's both shocking and awe of,
Hmm.
oh my God, like how long have I actually had this that I don't even recognize that I have it anymore? One of our mentors way back when used to say, if you stand in sewage long enough, it will stop stinking, right? If you have trauma, and by the way, we all have traumas. I don't care what your upbringing was. I just want to side tangent here. A lot of people talk about trauma, and because there's so much trauma being shared out in the world, like physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, drug abuse, all of these things, right? So I think for a lot of people, myself and Guy included, we grew up in a incredibly loving home. Both of our parents still married, still here, still loving us, loving each other. I mean, we had a blessed, in what most people would say, a blessed upbringing. And it took us over 15 plus years to get to a place where we could look at that relationship and not hold our parents up on these pedestals and realize that with the best of intentions and loving us and all that stuff, there was still trauma that happened. So there are hard traumas that happen in a human. Those are the more physical ones. Those are the ones that we hear about. And then there are soft traumas. These are the, not being emotionally met, not being attuned to, things like that. And just because you didn't have a hard trauma doesn't mean that you don't have traumas. We all have traumas. And so when the trauma gets embedded, and it's when we're very, very young, and then you're living life, you just assume that this is how life is. And when that trauma is fully processed and healed, it's that same sensation, like going to that practitioner. It's so, it's such a wow effect that now you're walking back through the same life, the same circumstances, the same people, the same, and yet nothing looks, feels, tastes, nothing is the same. The people are all of a sudden different, your circumstances are all of a sudden different, and it all happened in a snap of a finger. And so at level 2 is where we kind of get access to the ability to shift our awareness from that localized spot and into our body to allow for the healing and restoring of that neutrality that we were all born with. Right now, sometimes, and this is where uh, working with people is imperative. Some of you I know have been doing work for a long, long time. And I just want to offer that the only way out is through. You've probably heard that line before. So, awareness, witnessing the rupture or witnessing that place of pain or anguish or sadness or grief or terror or whatever it might be, these are the core places that create all these patterns. So when we try to understand them with awareness here, right, you can look down at that rupture. But because awareness is trapped in here and the mind is constantly telling it all of these things, it is going, there's no way we're going in there. Nope. I have kept you out of that space because it was so painful when it happened. I have done my job for decades, and now you want to go in there? Are you out of your goddamn mind? Like I've created an entire life for you so you don't have to experience it, and now you tell me you want to go back there? No, we're not doing that.
Mm.
And so the experience is that you can see it and you can touch it for a second, and then the mind is going to take you out of there. And so the only way to actually be able to go into these places is with support, with someone or a group of someone's holding that space for you. Imagine the difference between you trying to open a door and peeking back there and going, wow, that's really dark and I don't know what's back there, but I know it's going to be bad, right? On your own. Or you standing there with, like, imagine Guy and I standing beside you, holding your hand, plus this whole other group of people, and we're going to open this door together and we're going to walk through that place together. Where do you like? How do you think you're going to actually walk through that door? What's easier?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
healing work
I
really
was going to say
takes
a sense of safety is crucial.
exactly. So
Yeah.
healing work takes this level of safety in order to be able to go there, and the layers that you're able to see in the beginning are, okay. But as you dive deeper and deeper and deeper and you start to release these layers one by one, because you can't ever like jump into the core, you always have to go level by level by level. As you're doing that, you're really starting to touch some of the core aspects of your being, the core structures that make you who you are. And when you start to touch those, the ego mind flips out, because that is, now you're talking about identity is tied into this. Who I am in the world is tied to this. And so it's almost, to the ego, it's this ego death that needs to happen. And the ego knows this. When you touch these layers, it does not want to go there. It just does not want to go there. So that's level 2. Okay. Awareness here. And what we're looking for at level 2 is to increase the amount of time that we can stay in here, because here is where the magic is going to happen in the body. Okay. Now, level 3. Once you have awareness in the body, you are going to learn more about yourself in a very, very short period of time than you've ever learned before. You're going to start to notice, like, wow, that's why this pattern that you've already mapped out, because you've probably done a lot of the mindset work. You already know, oh, this pattern got created here and here and here, and this is why I respond. But imagine knowing the little catalyst that happens inside the body that kickstarts the entire process of the physical body and the mind body that gets you moving in that direction. So once you get that understanding, you start to create this distinction. And what you're able to do is you're able to now hold a portion of the awareness in your body and then begin to put another percentage of the awareness on someone else. And now you start to play with me, not me. And this is where you can really start to explore some incredible things as a practitioner, for example, gifts like being able to track other people's systems and actually feel what is happening inside of them. Now, imagine if you were not even a practitioner, but imagine if you were a parent and your child is going through something and you have the ability to hold your own system. Like you got you. You got you and you got your little parts and all that stuff. And then in addition, you can put that awareness on that little being and actually feel what that little being is going through in that moment. And because you've been able to give yourself certain healing and medicine for certain parts, you now know exactly what that individual needs as well. So whether this is your partner, whether this is your kids, whether this is a friend, whether this is a business partner or you're in a business meeting, the ability to hold awareness in here and then shift it to other gives you access unlike ever before. More than that, I'll say this one other piece is you actually know that when people are going into their trauma or their pattern or their survival mechanism,
Defense
you can
pattern.
attune and be aware of that. So instead of taking those things personally and realizing like, oh, they're doing this to me or blah, 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 you can actually notice that, oh my God, they're in a lot of pain right now. Or, oh, they feel really abandoned or alone or not heard. And then you can bring so much more compassion to the situation that where those situations before would escalate into this all out battle between your protective pattern and their protective pattern. It's like you don't have to go there anymore
Hmm.
because you could just have empathy and compassion that they're in this place and you'll know exactly what to give them.
Yeah, and the beautiful part about this is that it actually creates healing in both directions. Like I'll speak for like my wife's and my relationship, right? Like usually it's like a battle of will, like who wants this, who wants that, and my wife and I are on a page about a lot of things, but there are things that we're not, or like decisions with children that we might feel different about, right? Like that's gonna get pretty heated because it feels like the child's survival or well-being is at stake, and like we've all been in those conversations. And so for me, it's like I've had to let go of a concept that I had early on in childhood, which is like arguing with a spouse is like not a healthy thing to happen. Where now I'm like, it's totally fine. What really matters is like, okay, at the end of all that, like, how do we come back together into authentic connection? And then how do we help each other heal? And that's ultimately like what I've come to in our relationship is that either we can be warriors in our relationship and argue, right, and kind of like dig in our heels and do the kind of stuff that many relationships do, or you can really, like Elon said, is when you have this attunement with another human being, the natural byproduct here is a large amount of empathy because you start realizing that they are trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And I think this is true for the whole of humanity, which is they're just trying to get to a place of safe, like they want to feel safe in their system and authentic connection with another. Okay, most of our traumas is where we didn't feel safe and we did not feel connected to other. And so we have this very lonely experience of trying to like dig ourselves out of this hole and like, being the one that fixes everything, or we feel powerless and so we merge into other people's system to think that they're the authority that will bring us out of this experience. And so one of the key elements that can happen at this level is this recognition of what helps people heal is truly your presence, your attuned presence. And so if I'm in an argument with my wife, for example, like what's going on is one of her trauma experiences is occurring and she's in a defensive pattern. The way I can disarm it, and it's not, again, it's not a, I'm not trying to achieve something here like fixing my wife. That's not what I'm saying. Or vice versa for her, for me. It's what I know is that her part is trying to get a need met that it's never gotten met before. I can choose through my attunement now to help that part meet its needs. Okay? If we're successful in doing this, then that part, for all intents and purposes, is healed. And so will either rear its head not at all in our relationship or will rear its head a lot less in our relationship, which is beneficial for both parties. Because now there's just more neutrality, love, connection in our relationship, period. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm feel way better in my life when I have my wife in my corner. I'm more successful in my business. I have a healthier body. I'm healthier in my emotional state. I'm healthier in my mind state. So it's like we're participating, right, in each other's lives. And there is a, line behind every great man, there's a woman, which really should be by his side, and vice versa, though. But next to every great woman, hopefully there's a great man also supporting her. I'm a lot more confident when my relationship is in a good place. And so having this recognition that even if you don't have this a mutual recognition, because you're like, well, what am I going to be, their healer, but they're not going to be my fucking healer? It's like, well, no, because you, by even silently offering presence to people in your life who are going through challenging times or may have like, robust reactions to you, meaning like they get angry or facilitate abuse or whatever it might be, like that's because in that moment that person doesn't feel safe, and so they are lashing out, basically like saying get the fuck away from me, or like trying to create distance or fear or whatever it might be, because they're just trying to get back to a neutral state in their body and safety. And so if you can hold their experience, not make it personal, like Elon said, hold your attunement, hold your awareness, that person gets met, they get seen. I can't tell you how many conversations we have, our coaches have with people who are investigating our work or are doing our work. And just the sheer fact that someone's listening, not just listening, but like
Mm.
truly offering awareness with them is already a breakthrough, because it changes something. Like most of us are just yelling at our parents, yelling at our family members, trying to be like, I'm here, can you see me? Like, and truly they are not being seen because the other system doesn't know how to meet them in a way that offers them an experience that they're being seen. But if somebody, even a stranger, sees them, they're it's like our self-worth comes back online. There's a show right now, real quick, and then I'll pass it back to Elon to continue here. There's a show that my roommates turned me on to. It's this medium that's on Netflix. He's has a waiting list of 300,000 people. He's a young kid, 20 something years old, clearly has his aptitude. If you watch it, you're going to be like stunned by what he recognizes. But in a way, he's doing what Elon and I are talking about here. He clearly has an open awareness and can track the field in a very specific way, but he gets very clear images about people who've passed and people who are living to degree and level of truthfulness. Like he nails it 99% of the time. They're like, you couldn't possibly know that about that person, or like a disease they're dealing with, like, just these really abstract things. But what you notice is at the end of the day, like, why are these people connecting with as a medium to talk about a loved one that may have passed, or maybe somebody is living? Because a lot of times the parents, like in their consciousness where they were, never apologized or never told the child that they were good. And from beyond the grave, so to speak, again, their consciousness is still alive, even if their body is not. They speak through this child and they bring these very specific events up. And like sometimes the parents apologize to the child, who's now an adult, right? But they're like apologizing or saying something that they're good or whatever it is. And the people are, breaking down and crying. And they're like, oh my God, I waited my whole life for my mom to say that to me. And it's just being channeled through this young kid, basically, to them. And they will express it as, that was so healing for me.
Yeah.
Because they got seen. It's all any of us really want. We just want to be told that we're good and be seen. And then somehow we want to be able to reflect that back to ourselves. And so it's very, very interesting. I will try to remember the name of the show, but if you just type in like psychic medium or something like
Alex
that,
said
you'll
it's
find
called Tyler.
Tyler's. Yeah, Tyler, something with an H is his last name. Yeah,
So I think
yeah,
that's the name of the show.
yeah.
So that's the magic, right? It's now again we're opening that aperture of awareness. And as we open the aperture of awareness, before, right, it was stuck. Then we open it, we can shift level 2 and bring it in here. And then we open it further. Life After Death is the name of the show. And
Yeah.
then we open it further, and now there's awareness here and out here. Okay. Now, when we get to level 4, things become very, very cool and very, very interesting. So this is something that's only started to awaken in Guy and I'd say in the last year or so. The realization was this: if awareness is this source, we say healing. I want to name it something else. It's a connection to the divine source, a connection to this benevolent, brilliant energy that has always been with you, always wants to be with you. But as we age, the difference between, kids, like as we get older, we go, there's identity, there's me, there's egoic mind, there's a narrator, there's the problem solver, there's all these things that they want to run life. They want to show you how important they are and why you should trust them over this benevolent source. And slowly but surely, they gain your favor. And slowly but surely, you forget that you are, in fact, and always have been connected to and supported by this divine benevolent source that we all come from. And so you're out there operating on your own. And just like an incredibly patient and amazing parent, it will happily take the wheel from you and happily show you the fastest, most amazing way to get to where you want to get to. But the second you say to this parent, hey, I want to do this, let me do this, the parent just steps back and goes, okay,
Okay.
do your thing. And I just want you to know that whenever you need, I'm here. So what we're doing in essence with awareness as we open this, we're simply reconnecting back to this infinite, benevolent, divine force. And the connection to this force is, it's like being connected to eternal wisdom, uh, magical healing, resource. I mean, like energetic resource, vitality. I mean, it's being plugged into this incredible, incredible battery of everything, right? So what we realized was, okay, if our awareness, if that, you can imagine that little ball, if our awareness is that connection to that source, and we bring that awareness into our body, all this amazing healing was happening, right? Like all these parts that didn't want to ever be seen were all of a sudden seen, and all of these aspects of ourselves that we've been hiding from ourselves all of a sudden are showing up and being healed. It was magical. The thought came through, which was, what if we placed this awareness on something? So Guy, we kind of talk about like this virtual reality hologram that we all live in, right? You're basically in creation, co-creation, and that's creating the hologram. So we said, what if we take this awareness and instead of just holding it here or on another, we actually put it on something? And our practice was, we're going to put this on our business. We're going to put this on our finances. And lo and behold, what
Mhm.
we witnessed over this past year was that in the same way that awareness was able to highlight and release within our bodies everything that no longer needed to be there or no longer served us, right? Bring back to neutrality, back to homeostasis. It began to do the same thing in our business. It began to do the same thing in our finances. Now, I will say a caveat here.
I was gonna say, give a
Yeah,
caveat.
I will say a caveat here. And it goes both for out in the hologram as well as in the body. Okay. And that is that in order for homeostasis to happen, in order for that realignment to happen, everything that no longer serves must be shed. Now, that sounds great in theory, right? But I want you to just get the depth of shedding that I'm talking about. Things that you have built, relationships,
that you rely on.
structures,
Hmm.
identities, patterns, everything that is tied into your reality and how it's structured begins to melt away and crumble like sand in your hand. And it doesn't matter how much you try to hold it or piece it back together, it is just seeping out.
To be the attorney here, may begin, may begin. Doesn't
Maybe again.
necessarily
Yeah.
mean it will. Yeah,
Yeah.
but like basically like structures that you've held dear, even maybe things that you heavily rely on, may disappear, and of course, naturally, that's going to bring up a lot of anxiety and fear and other parts. And guess what? Those parts have always been there. Those structures have kept those things at bay, but it's been an illusion because everything is temporal. Everything is coming and going anyway. But we have this feeling of solidity in what we know and what we have around us, and that's going to be here forever. And so, of course, if that starts being taken away from you, naturally the anxiety and the fear is going to arise, right? And so, like, you're always going to face down transformation through this frustration that's going to inevitably and naturally rise. That's not an indication of things going not well. That's actually an indication of things going well. Most people, it's what we call like child gardener disease, don't have the patience to be with sowing a new seed. Child gardener disease just means you go put a seed in the soil, you water it, and then you come back the next day, you don't see the fruits of your labor. And so instead of waiting to see the thing sprout, you go grab a shovel and you dig up the seed again to inspect it to find out what's wrong with the seed, when of course there's nothing wrong with the seed, you just didn't wait long enough. And that's what most of us haven't built a capacity for, is to be fluid and as nature does its thing and brings everything to equilibrium and homeostasis. We're like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, things are going wrong, and we go back to what we know, and we recapture the personality, we recapture the lessons, we recapture the trauma. We'll take all of it back just to stop even a mild amount of discomfort in our system, trying to get back to what feels like balance, when in fact it was never balanced in the first place.
Yeah.
You made up this whole fucking story up in the first place, and it's been seeming to keep things at bay, but it's all right there. It's always been right there. From the moment you had the trauma, it's always been right there, just
Yeah.
waiting for that illusion to drop to come back. But if you go through it, or say, and when you go through it, this is what liberation is. This is what freedom is. You're no longer at the effect or worry of that thing arising in your life anymore, and that experience or discomfort being there. Next time, in fact, if something arises like that, you're like, I got this.
Yeah.
Comes in, comes out, you're back to neutrality. And that's how kids operate.
And so this is very important, right? The reason also, right, we didn't talk about levels as this linear thing. And the reason that the levels are so important is because at level 4, when you're starting to put this awareness on certain aspects and you're watching as everything that you built. I mean, Guy and I built a company. We're celebrating. This is going to be year 11, right? So a decade in, we have this notion, hey, we're going to do this. And we start to watch as 10 years of work seemingly is crumbling in front of our very eyes, to the point that at one day we looked at each other, we're like, did we just like destroy our company? Like, are we done? And what happens is, if that would have happened, say, a year before, we wouldn't have been able to withstand it. Because as you're going through the levels, the piece that keeps being built and nurtured inside of you is this feeling of safety and support, and this knowing and trust develops from this benevolent source. Like, your connection to the source has just been proven time and time and time again, that when you get to this level and you're starting to put it on places in the hologram and you're watching things disappear, there's as much as parts are freaking out, and trust me, parts were freaking out, right? But there was a deeper part, like a deeper knowing that we could always connect to and just know and trust and surrender to, that it knew exactly what needed to be taken away so that something brilliant can be built. And I'm just going to give you the down and dirty punchline. Guy and I basically, in a span of 3 weeks. Now, granted, this process probably happened over. 6, 7 months, its entirety, as we watched all these things shift and move, and people come and go, and programs like it was this ongoing thing. But the punchline was that in November, we got to this place where we had invested a bunch of money from our business, but our idea was like, we're never going to touch those investments. That's just for us building a nest egg. And we got to this point in our business where we weren't able to make payroll that month. Like, we couldn't do it. And the only option was to reach into those investments and pull money out that we had said that we're not going to do. And trust me, there was a huge pull in both of our systems to just save ourselves from this feeling of despair and failure, of both internally, letting our team down, letting all this stuff down. And we sat. Do you remember that day? We sat in silence and we're like, let's just sit together and just see what arises. And both of us came out. And the intention was, what do we do? Right. And both of us came out and just looked at each other. We're like, no, we're not touching the investments. We're going to ride this thing. And in a span of, from that day, 3 weeks later, there were 7 figures in our bank account. I just want you to like let that sink in there for a second, right? In the moment where the universe and everything inside of us, parts screaming, save me, save me, save me, we had developed enough safety, support, and trust that we were willing to wait that little bit longer for the magic to happen. And I swear, like, if we had done the thing to pull us out of that situation, I don't know if what happened would have happened. So when we talk about the levels, right, this, can you start to see how it kind of, it's not this so much, but it's a building. It's like a building of a foundation that allows for the aperture to open wider, allows for the things to arise that have been hidden from you for so long because it's been so scary to witness and see. Allow for things to fall apart that have been ready to fall apart for years, but you've just been clinging onto them for dear life. Like, no, it can't. And it's in the letting go. It's just in that simple letting go that all of this magic begins to unfold. And can you trust that? And so that's why we take people through this process of level 1, level 2, level 3, and then we get to this place of level 4. So I just want to offer you, like, if this excites you, if this conversation resonates with you, I want you to know that every one of our programs we have the Awareness Effect Academy, and they're called level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and each program works in conjunction with each other to walk you through that opening of the aperture, to walk you through the building of that safety, to walk you through that experience, not from a thought mind, but an experience of trust and knowing and connection. And watch as you do that, all of these things begin to move and shift. The people realign, the opportunities realign, all of the stuff. And we're really excited to share this with the world because it is, after searching for 20 plus years, it is the process that has made the most profound difference, not only in our lives, but in the lives of our family, our friends, our clients, our coaches, everyone. And it is simple because Guy and I like simple and practical. It is not complicated. It is not confusing. It's just a matter of practice, doing the work day in, day out.
Yes. Beautiful.
Yes,
Yes. As
yes,
one of our teachers says, yes.
yes.
Yes. So, everybody, hope you enjoyed that. Just a reminder here, depending on when you're listening to this, if you are listening live, we have a live event coming up here this weekend on April 30th and May 1st. Of course, if you listen to this when it comes out in the podcast, don't fret. There's always another event looming, but it'll probably be a few months down the road. In either case, you can go to intuitivemind.live in your URL browser bar, intuitivemind.live, and purchase your ticket. Again, it's a 2-day intensive, diving deep into all these practices, how you cultivate these levels of awareness, what you can do with them, and really more than anything, it's like, again, you can understand this stuff. It could be really interesting for you, and that's great. And inquire into it. It can't be taught through understanding. This can only be taught through personal experience. And someone's asking here, what about level 5? Level 5 is, I told Elon to make it up. He actually told me there's 4 levels, but I wrote 5 levels on this. So we said level 5 is rainbow body.
You just go rainbow body. Just
You, you disappear into a bunch of colors, and nobody knows where you are, but you are just traveling the cosmos. I like again, like the levels are, yeah, honestly, the levels are like they're just maps, and they're nice to use, but they're inconsequential. At the end of the day, it's all one experience that we're all having. There's really only one level. There's just the distinctions that we make through language about different qualities that are here, and at the end of the day, that's what matters. It's like the quality of your living experience is truly the only thing that matters. It will dictate your perceptions. It will dictate how you feel about your relationships, how you feel about yourself, what's possible in terms of healing, what's possible in terms of receiving money. Like, that's really all that matters. Now, what we want to do is we want to notice as many qualities of reality as we can, and how do we direct ourselves, through our awareness into certain qualities and stay in some of these what feel like healthier qualities of living than, where humanity has lived for a few millennia now. So, we are slowly coming out of a slumber, slowly in human time, but probably rather quickly in spiritual time. And some of these maps are the ways that Elon and I have learned them and have gotten there in our own experiences. And our invitation is always to guide more people into these experiences, because once you're there, it's like sky's the limit. This is a where we say this is mindset has diminishing returns. This seems to have an infinity of gained returns. Like, the longer Elon and I practice this, the better it gets. It doesn't get old. The novelty doesn't run out. It's always interesting. There's no boredom here. You are literally the most interesting video game on planet Earth to yourself, and you are creating your experience. And these inner parts are creating your experience. You might as well get them to a very healthy place. So what's being created is a healthy life experience. And that's really what it's all about. All right, friends, we love you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your awareness and attention. Always appreciate that very much. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye, y'all. Peace.